When a life shaped by humility and compassion comes to an end, it leaves behind more than memories. It leaves a living legacy. On the quiet morning of April 21st, 2025, at Domus Sanctae Marthae in Vatican City, Pope Francis peacefully departed this life. Not with grand ceremonies, not with public fanfare, but with the same quiet grace that had defined his entire journey. In the days that followed, the world came together, not just to remember a leader, but to honor a man whose simple acts of love had touched lives across the world. Each moment of his farewell reflected who he truly was, a shepherd of hope, a friend to the overlooked, a bridge between heaven and humanity. This is not just the story of a farewell, it is the story of a final journey, a journey that reminds us greatness is not in how loudly we live, but in how deeply we are remembered. Let us walk together through 6 moments that defined Pope Francis' last and most enduring message to the world. April 21st, 2025, began like any other morning in the quiet corridors of Domus Sanctae Marthae. But for Pope Francis, it marked the close of an extraordinary earthly journey. At precisely 7:35 a.m., surrounded by the simple comforts of his private residence, he peacefully departed from this life. No great alarms, no hurried steps, just a quiet breath, fading into the morning light. The official statement, a sudden stroke, leading to an irreversible cardiac event. It was swift, it was gentle, and in many ways, it reflected how he had lived. Without seeking grandeur, without clinging to power, simply trusting in the hands of God. The Vatican later shared that Pope Francis had spent his final hours in prayer, a rosary in hand, a soft smile on his lips, a soul at peace. It is said that the way a person departs reveals the essence of their life. And for Pope Francis, his gentle farewell whispered louder than any sermon he ever preached. It told a story of humility, of trust, of unwavering faith. In his final breath, he reminded the world, true greatness is not found in shouting from the mountaintop, but in the quiet, steadfast heartbeat of a life lived for others. And so, the journey of Pope Francis transitioned, not into darkness, but into a sunrise beyond our sight. On April 23rd, 2025, the grand doors of St. Peter's Basilica opened wide. And there, resting in solemn stillness, lay the simple wooden coffin of Pope Francis. It was a moment that spoke without words, a humble vessel honoring a man who had spent his life lifting others. For 3 days, a river of love flowed through the basilica. Over 250,000 visitors came, pilgrims, families, dignitaries, strangers, each carrying their own memories, their own prayers. Some bowed silently, some paused in reflection, many simply stood filled with gratitude. Among them was Sister Genevieve Janingros. In a tender moment of humanity, she stepped closer than custom allowed to bid a heartfelt goodbye to her old friend. That single act, so real, so sincere, captured everything Pope Francis had stood for: love over formality, compassion over custom. A church, not of walls, but of open hearts. Each visitor who passed by the coffin became part of a living tribute, an unspoken chorus of gratitude rising into the ancient rafters of the basilica. It wasn't a farewell born out of obligation. It was a farewell born out of love. And as the crowds came and went, one truth lingered in the sacred air. True greatness is not measured by monuments or titles, but by how deeply we are remembered in the hearts of others. And Pope Francis was deeply, endlessly loved. April 26th, 2025. The morning sun rose gently over St. Peter's Square, where an ocean of hearts gathered to say goodbye. More than 400,000 souls stood together, pilgrims, world leaders, families, children, united by something greater than politics, titles, or borders. The world had come, not just to honor a pope, but to celebrate a life lived in service to all. Hongi Giovanni Battista Re presided over the Mass, his voice steady yet filled with emotion, as he spoke words of hope, mercy, and everlasting light. Among the crowd were faces from every corner of the earth, presidents and paupers, princes and pilgrims, all standing side by side, not as powerful or powerless, but simply as people. In the gentle rhythm of prayer and song, there was no hierarchy, only shared humanity, only shared longing. Flags from 100 nations fluttered together in the breeze, a living mosaic of unity in a divided world. It was a sight the cameras captured, but only the heart could truly feel. Because in that moment, the square was not just a place. It was a testament to a man who spent his life bringing people closer to one another and to something greater. And so, with prayers rising like soft incense into the blue April sky, Pope Francis was lifted, one final time, by the love of a world he had so tenderly embraced. In a world steeped in tradition, Pope Francis once again chose a different path. At his final farewell, he asked for simplicity, a simplicity that spoke volumes. Instead of the elaborate, multi-layered coffins used for centuries, he requested a single wooden coffin lined quietly with zinc. No grand emblems, no golden decorations, just humility, wrapped in dignity. And unlike many of his predecessors who found their rest in the hallowed crypt beneath St. Peter's Basilica, Pope Francis chose a different resting place. Santa Maria Maggiore, home to the icon of Salus Populi Romani, a symbol he had revered throughout his life. By resting there, he reminded the world, the church is not built on monuments of stone, but on monuments of spirit. It was a decision that gently broke with tradition, not out of rebellion, but out of faithfulness to the very essence of his life's message. A message that whispered, true leadership does not cling to power, it lets go with grace. And in doing so, leaves behind a legacy far greater than any tomb. Pope Francis did not simply change where he would be remembered, he changed how we would remember. When the simple wooden coffin of Pope Francis was sealed, inside were placed not treasures of gold, but treasures of spirit. A bishop's mitre, a pastoral staff, a simple rosary, the fisherman's ring, and tucked gently alongside them was the Rogito, a humble document summarizing the life and legacy of a shepherd who walked closely with his flock. No jewels, no crowns, only signs of a life lived for service, not status. Even in death, Pope Francis taught through symbols. Each item whispered the same truth. Greatness is measured not by what you possess, but by what you leave in the hearts of others. And when the stone marker was finally placed, it bore just a single word, Franciscus. No grand titles, no lengthy inscriptions, just a name. A reminder that dignity needs no embellishment, only authenticity. In a world that often measures success by how loudly it shouts, Pope Francis left a legacy that whispers and yet will echo for generations. A legacy carved not in stone, but in the quiet chambers of the human heart. As Pope Francis's coffin entered Santa Maria Maggiore, it was not greeted first by cardinals or dignitaries. It was welcomed by those who had once been pushed to the edges of society. 40 individuals stood there, men and women who had known homelessness, who had fled violence, who had lived through rejection and loss. Migrants, survivors of trafficking, former prisoners, members of the transgender community, all gathered to offer one final embrace. It was a scene unlike any in papal history. No barriers, no velvet ropes, just open arms and open hearts. Because Pope Francis had spent his life reminding the world, those often left unseen are closest to the heart of God. And in this sacred moment, it was not power or prestige that had the place of honor. It was mercy. It was compassion. The final witnesses to his journey were not kings or princes. They were the forgotten who had been seen. Through their tears, through their prayers, through their presence, Pope Francis' greatest legacy lived on. Not carved into stone, but alive in the beating hearts he had touched. As the final prayers faded into the April sky and the world slowly returned to its daily rhythm, one truth remained. Pope Francis' light did not end with his final breath. It lives on, in the simple wooden coffin, in the gentle farewell, in the hands of the forgotten who touched his journey. It lives on, in every act of kindness, every voice for the voiceless, every bridge built between hearts once divided. He taught us that true greatness is not about titles or wealth or fame. It is about humility. It is about service. It is about love that moves quietly but leaves an everlasting mark. And so as we walk forward, we carry more than memories. We carry a call to live with open hearts, a call to lift those who have fallen, a call to let our own lives whisper greatness through simple, everyday compassion. Pope Francis's journey may have ended here, but his light will continue to shine through you, through me, through all who dare to believe that love, quiet, humble, enduring, can change the world.